It
It's
is.
looking
I'm
good.
technically in the same room, but I have repositioned and repurposed so you get this nice background. I imagine
Yeah.
you see some familiar friends here. We got Walter Sobchak
Holy shit.
here. I got some DBZ stuff, Dragon Ball Z stuff in here. This guy's Chinese for sure, and he's holding the Chinese proverbs, the sages and their sayings. I got the dude up here, and so we are good to go. And we're back. Oh, we're
You're back,
back.
man.
I'm back with my main man, Wan. What's
Hey,
up,
hey,
man?
hey, what's happening, man? It's good to be back.
Well, I'll tell you what's happening. The last time that you and I did a show together, we launched into some pretty serious material. Um,
Hmm.
the reception that I got was actually quite favorable. One, people felt good being informed. Two, the other piece of feedback that I got more than anything, they're like, who is this guy? He's so interesting. And we want to know more about him. So today, our main focus, if we have a focus, and I got my focus juice right here, a couple of fingers of the
Alrighty, alrighty. I
it
see.
is morning time for Eric Wan. It's nighttime for Brooks, and that's just the way we got to do it. That's just the way that we got to do it. So
Hey, we globalize, right? We globalize. But thanks, man. Thanks for the love. Appreciate it. I'm glad that people enjoyed our silly little conversation. I mean, it's just, I mean, I'm glad that it informed people, right? But for me and you, that's just a conversation that could happen any day of the week, and I'm glad that has brought some joy or any sort of value in anybody who's been listening. And yeah, cool. It's thanks for being curious about me, man. So what do you want? Where do we go from here? I'm gonna let you steer the ship, my captain.
that is
I'm
my
just here
job,
along for the
sir.
ride.
I will do my job and I'll do it effectively. At least that's the goal. I mean, honestly, so well, the way the show normally runs is we tend to just end up where we end up. We can talk about what's top of mind, but really, I think the one thing that we have that could be valuable is telling your story a little bit. There will come a time in your story where I enter the scene. And I think the more that we talk about that time would be fun, how we developed our
Hmm.
relationship. Well, the types of, we can't tell everything, but some of the, mishaps we used to get into. And then I do want to touch on your work because
Okay.
it's
Okay. Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah.
and it is very much in alignment with things that I've done. You just execute it differently. So,
Hmm.
give me the eagle eye view of Eric's story. They got a little bit of
All
it.
right.
They got a little bit of your
Yeah.
history, and how. What I want to know is, Eric, what we're going to find out by the end of this story is how we got to that epic stash that you're wearing. People will be able to see this on the YouTubes this time,
Yeah,
and they're going to be
we're
able to see the
recording this, right?
stash. Oh yeah,
This is a visual
yeah,
and audio experience
correct,
for your followers and for your tribe.
correct.
Yeah, eagle eye view. So let's go from there, right? So I think if I think last time we talked about where I'm from, Hong Kong is where it was my city. It's where I grew up in, and we talked a little bit about how I got a chance to live in the UK when I was 14 years old until the age of until I was a young adult in my 20s. So I went to a boarding school in the UK, Harry Potter style, how inter-house competition, all of that is real, guys, ladies and gentlemen. All that Harry Potter stuff is are real, is true, minus the magic. Major disappointment for a few people here, but, but it's true,
My
right? They
sister's going to
are.
be one of them. My sister's for sure going to be one of them.
Are we talking about Daisy or are we
Madison is her name. Yeah,
Maddie?
yeah.
Right, right.
Maddie's a huge Harry Potter fan, so she'll be glad to hear that some of it's real, but of course the magic
The
is in the
magic,
movie.
sadly, maybe just not in my school. Maybe
Yeah,
another other part of the school. I was not chosen,
you got off at
but
9 and not at 9 3/4 is what I'm hearing.
probably yeah, wrong platform. Story of my life. But but so yeah, so a large part of my adolescence was in the UK, and that gives me so that actually has a huge a part into play of where I am right now today. It's how things are, right? You call it destiny, call it fate. I don't believe in that, but it just a big part of what we are is what we experience in our younger or previous life. So reason I want to bring that into is because one of the what I'm doing right now, right? Let's talk about what I'm doing right now because there's a linkage between that and here. So what I'm doing right now is very similar to what you're trying to do, right? But more in a work kind of sense. So for you, I think it's more on a personal life. Am I correct in making that
Correct.
assumption, right?
Yes.
So for me, so I work for a company. So I know I know you did one with Gordon, right? So we work together. So Gordon and I, so you can listen to his podcast. I'm sure he's gonna tell you about what he does. But my part of the business, so we co-founded this company together in Seoul, and my part of the business is mostly focusing on the work part of people's life and how people, because if you think about it, most people spend a lot of their damn life at work. And and it's from my perspective that those time you spend at work, it should, it, I mean, let's go on a spectrum, right? On the best side of that spectrum, on the most positive side, you should enjoy your work. You should be something that you have a passion for. It should be something that compensate you well enough in your personal life, either through money or whatever it is that you're looking for. But in my perspective, that should be the best case scenario. Even when it comes to worst case scenario, right? We don't live in a perfect world. And I fully understand that. And even at the worst case scenario, it should not suck. Or it shouldn't suck every single day.
Mm, mm.
And from what I've seen is because you've lived in Asia, you live in Korea, uh, that's a rare case.
Mm.
That is sad, and it's not sad. I think it's just how the social and also the economic factor into in the past. So I don't know. I don't want to. Let's not go into history again. I think we did that last time. But South Korea is a very young country as a nation. As a young nation, right? Let's just use that as a term. We talk about, I mean, European like to shit on America and say, oh, America is so young, like 200 something years history, but Korea literally has about less than 80 years of history as a
Right.
nation.
Mm.
And 80 years ago, so Korea War and all that stuff happened. And it's after the Korea War that we have a nation called South Korea, right? This nation doesn't exist before then. And to give the listener a bit of a perspective on the terms of economics, Korea around 60, 50 years ago have the same GDP as Ghana.
Right. It was basically a third world country without infrastructure, without natural resources, and with
Yep.
very few trade relationships with any other countries.
Nothing, right? It was bombed to hell. It was colonized under Japanese rule for a long time, which, by the way, 3rd of March is a holiday, Monday.
Mm.
It's the day that they formally declare call it like the Declaration of Independence. So that's what happening on Monday, right? And that only happened not so long ago. You gotta understand that. And as a nation, and nowadays, what you have, it's everywhere now. Korea, right? We're talking
Huge.
about
How do
huge,
you
right?
huge?
We
Everybody
talk
knows
about
K-pop. Everybody knows
culture.
K-pop.
You talk about culture. We
Movies.
talk about you talk about culture. You talk about technology. There's a Samsung in every home, I guarantee you,
Mm,
because of the chip that they make,
mm,
right?
mm.
Is every cell phone, not every, but large amount of modern technology has a Korean influence on it, right? So that dramatic, that super high speed progression has made a lot of the stuff has a bit of a mismatch when it comes to uh, the relationship of people when it comes to work itself. So back then, a lot of people were just working to survive, right? Because when you're a developing nation, a lot of the time that is your priorities, that is your government's priorities, and that in the terms became a citizen priority, right? You had to
Yeah.
work to survive. But now you have a huge amount of upper middle class or middle class that priority might change, and they themselves is trying to change themselves into a pure still changing from a manufacturing economy to a service-based economy, right? As you can see, culture is an export now. K-pop, Itaewon Class is on Netflix, right? That drug me that oh, wow, holy shit, that. And a lot of Korean what last Oscar, the best picture, best director, won by
Yeah.
a South Korean movie, right? Parasite.
Parasite. Mm.
Parasite. So that you can see that people are starting to have a bit of an awakening when it comes to what they want in their life. And life, as I said earlier, involve a lot of your time. A big, huge part of your life is involved work, in a career, in being a professional, right? So a lot of the time, my work is helping a company to make sure that their employees are getting that, and it's a bit of a challenge because, as I say earlier, things has progressed at a very, very quick momentum, a lot of pace going through. So there's still, I mean, to give you a bit of an example, one of the biggest challenge moving from a manufacturing economy to a service to a knowledge-based work economy is the matter of time, right? How you spend your time.
Mm.
For example, in a factory line, in a manufacturing line, how much time you put into it has an equal correlation between your productivity, right? Let's say you spend 8 hours in a factory, you will get this fixed amount of product, pretty much. You can calculate that, right?
Yes.
In production economy. So the more time you spend on a factory line, the more the more productive you're gonna be,
Yeah, so
right?
they create second shift and they create third shift, but then there's a point where you can't create more shift. You can't build more factories. There's just no more growth left. And Korea, considering it's a really small country, landmass wise, it's hitting that cap. There's only so many places that they can put
Right.
residences. There are only so many places they can put factories. And one other point that I'll add on, because I see where you're going with this, give some context to the listener, is that the culture that still permeates the mainstream of Korea is the one that worked to get them where they are. Hard work, head down, don't think about yourself. Joy is not the point. We have to survive. But now they're far past surviving as a general whole, and they're into thriving. So now they're in this thrive phase, and there's a book called What Got You Here Won't Get You
Won't
There.
get you there.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so
Yeah.
they've gotten here, they want to get there, and they realize what's worked before is not what's going to help them work. And so people like
Yeah.
Eric are coming in to help with that, ease that transition.
Yeah. So the transition is because when you come to a knowledge-based economy, when it comes to a service-based economy, that equation of the more time you spend on a certain things equal productivity doesn't apply anymore, right? Because if you try and look at creative economy, right? If you want to be creative, uh, if you spend 8 hours, doesn't most of the time it doesn't mean that you're going to have 8 hours of creativity comes out of it, right? Because
Mm.
human being doesn't work like that, and you yourself can put some input into that, right? When it comes to using your mind, a lot of the time it's more quality over quantity, right?
Mm. Yeah. And a lot of
So yeah,
trial and error, and a lot of things that gets thrown away. uh, a lot of effort that gets thrown away. But once you've made something and it's created in its final form, the amount of return that you can get on said creation is many times exponential to the effort that you put in, because it can continue in perpetuity for as long as it's popular. So that Blackpink song or album, or that show Itaewon Class, or that movie Parasite, it's made, it's produced, and the return on it is not in alignment with the amount of time that they spent making it. It's now out
yeah,
there, it's created, and it continues to earn
to
money, so to speak, over
influence
them,
and
and
continue to
influence.
influence other artists, to influence other creator and that front, right? And so to bring it back into what I do, a lot of it is the relationship between managers, between leaders, having them to understand that how that you can't, it's not that if you yell louder, if you push people harder, then you can get more out of it, right? So that is where I come into play when it comes to the work that I do, and also when it comes to making sure that the workplace itself is an environment that enable people to become the most productive, right? People is an element of it, and then the space that they use, the structure of work itself, the way how people work, all of this, I think, we call it you can call it ecosystem, but I prefer to call it what we call system thinking, right? So
Mm.
it's similar to what you do, Brooks, right? How the environment that you're in, the interaction that you have with people, with your whole environment, would have an impact when it comes to the behavior that we're looking for, right? So when it comes to workplace, behavior is what most people are looking to uh, 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 focus on right now, right? Because when it comes to a service-based economy, when it comes to a creative-based economy, the behavior matters. This is what I do, right? And how did I got started is funny, right? Because I appreciate that me and you doing this global thing, right? Because I think uh, that is the one of the diversity is one of the absolutely advantage that anybody should seek to experience when it comes to culture, when it comes to experience. Like the reason that I got into this industry of like call it whatever you want to call it, HR consulting, because people consulting, organization consulting, whatever you want to call it is. So I used to work in hotels. I don't know if you knew that I told you about this, right? So I used to work in hospitality and tourism.
That is a shared
Uh,
experience, and I think it came up in our last one. You were describing uh, who was the guy that worked at the hotel that didn't have a job, and he just picked his nose and bit his fingernails, and then he was the guy that they'd send out if there was a problem. But I remember, yeah, yeah, that was a great part of the story, by the way.
so yeah, so I was working in hospitality, and then I came to Yonsei with you together in Korea, right? And have you spoken how much of a mad dash for job it was at the coming to the end of our MBA
No,
venture, right?
it's
You
never been
have not.
described.
So, to give the listener a bit of a context, so this is back what 10 years ago now, right? It's 2009, 2010. Yeah, 11 years now.
Yeah, we met. We started in August of 2010, and our
2010.
final graduation ceremony was in 2012 in the early like February or so. But we
February,
finished
yeah.
course requirements December 11. And just you're about to talk about the end. Let's just talk about the beginning for a second.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember they said if you make it through the first month, you're going to be fine. And I was like, oh, yeah, like, of course I'm going to make it through the first month. Why would I go through all this trouble not to make it through the first month? And they didn't tell us we were going to be doing 100 hours of school a week. We were in class for 30 hours. We had double that at least for requirements. And what they didn't exactly explain to us is that the first month was going to be the equivalent of an entire semester of work.
Just cramping in all the I think what the first month is you have to do statistics, finance, and all that.
And there were
Sometimes
people dropping like flies. Like third class,
true,
we're
true,
down
true.
3 people. It's
I
like
know
people
it
couldn't
was
handle it. Yeah, it was crazy.
uh,
Yeah.
it was definitely an experience the first couple of weeks for me. I was like, oh wow, this is how it works, and then we find out that everything is graded on a curve. So, oh, actually, none of that matters.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's all not work very hard, okay?
Yes. Yes.
Sort of a
Yeah. They didn't
you want to
realize
call a
they
cartel.
actually they were fostering a really good team environment. I just don't think it was the team environment they were intending to foster.
No, 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 no. Let's all just try to get by
Yeah.
and see how much.
And there's always I won't name names. I won't name names, but there were people. There are those overachievers. They don't like to they don't like to work they don't like to work out with other people. They like to do very well on the tests. They were fucking up the curve for everybody. We had to
Oh
have a
man,
couple of serious conversations with some folks.
definitely. Those guys need to learn a little bit more about teamwork, and
Let's
just
have a
we don't.
beer. Let's go out. Let's have a drink. Maybe eat some galbi. Chill out, man. You just
Chill
gotta
out for a bit,
chill
man.
out, man.
Chill out.
Chill.
So yeah, so it was a good experience. I mean, the 18 months of MBA was definitely useful when it got, I mean, teaching wise, not so good. I'm shitting on Yonsei right now, but in terms of getting to build the network, right? I mean, I met Gordon there. We're still working together 15 years later now. It's been going on 5 years, but so at the end of the MBA, we're all looking for jobs, right? I mean, why wouldn't you? Like, you do an MBA in Korea, you want to find a job in Korea, right? At least get something going on. So my job, so my internship during my MBA was with Tesco. I don't know if I'm not sure if your listener is familiar with this retail chain. In the world of retail, you have Walmart, which is number one by a long, long, long distance, right? And then number two is the two European companies fighting over it. It's Carrefour and Tesco. Carrefour and Tesco. Carrefour is a French company, retail company. The third one is Tesco, is a retail supermarket company based in the UK. So what they were doing in Korea back in 2010 is they wanted to build an Asia Leadership Academy based in Incheon, Korea, right next to the airport. And they've been looking for somebody who could work with Korean and also they could work with British people. Because if you have worked with those two culture type, that you would notice that they're quite different when it comes to ways of working, and just generally cultural interaction is quite different when it comes to British and Korea. One is very hierarchical, very, very, I won't get into it, but very different, right? So just so happened that I have that experience of working with British people, having growing up in the UK, and also having done my MBA in Korea. So that gives me opportunity to work for this large company on leadership developments and generally on things that involve how to make an organization work, right? So to give you a sense of how big Tesco was back in 2010, worldwide they have 500,000 employees. So it's a big company, and and they've been going and they've existed since I, I think their founder story, Jack Cohen's story, is he took his first paycheck after came back from the Second World War,
Mm.
and then he got his company Tesco started. So he has a company that has a long history, right? We're talking about a company that has a longer history than Korea, if you talk about it. So when a company is that large, and when a company has exists for that long, then they would have a pretty good system and philosophy when it comes to managing and motivating people. Because let's face it, right? Retail is not exactly the most motivating career out there. Right? I don't know. Have you worked in retail before? I've worked in a supermarket before. It's quite demotivating. It can be very demotivating, right?
And very mind numbing.
Mind numbing. You have to deal with uh, challenging people on a regular basis, right?
Very kind of you.
So
Very kind way to explain that.
yeah, I have to check my word quite carefully. Being quite conscious that I'm being recorded right now. So I definitely checked my words there. So they have a very good system on ensuring that the employee would feel engaged, would feel that what they're doing is meaningful, even though you're just stacking shelf or even though you're just checking out. Working as a cashier when it comes to checking out, right? So they have very good ways to ensure that the what I talked about, right? On the worst day, it doesn't suck so much. It sucks, but it doesn't suck so much. And on the best day, you could feel like you're a king of the world working for a supermarket. So from there, I learned a great deal, right? When it comes to motivation, when it comes to leadership, and when it comes to creating a structure that enable people to feel like, you know what, work doesn't suck so much today. Right? So to give you a bit of an idea on what I do. So this is what I do, right? Is to help company to achieve that, and also so the people at work they could get a more sense of engagement when it comes to doing what they do. Yeah.
Now, one of the things, so actually, just so the listeners know, like you and I have been friends for a really long time, and despite all that, like I'm learning in this conversation. So the point of this show is like, yeah, I'm not pre-setting up a lot of this stuff, so I'm actively learning as I go. But there are some things that I do know, and that is that one of the methods or tools that you use to do that was called or is called Lego Play.
Mm.
And that always fascinated me because I grew up with Legos. I did play with them. My brother John, he was like a Lego expert. He was one of these, and he was smart. So I have three brothers. I have John, who is now 19. I have Hayden, who's a senior in high school. He's 17, and I have Dylan, who's now 15. And John and Dylan are brothers on my mom's side, and I have Hayden, who's on my dad's side. And John uh, was getting very frustrated as a kid because he would spend so much time and investment building these Lego things, right? And then at the last hour, little toddler Dylan shows up and he wants to play with it, and he wants to break it. And of course, he's being loud and he's doing this, and mom wants to appease him. She's like, John, just let him play with it, just let him have it. So
yeah.
John became like a master with Legos. What he would do is he would look at the instructions, and then he would have his like separate he had his like set. Well, actually, one of the famous was like a Harry Potter set, right? But he had a set, and then he had like all of his extra pieces on things that he didn't play with anymore. And he would build two identical models because he knew that he was going to have to give one of them away. And so
Ah, yeah,
he
yeah,
would make his, and then he'd make the one for Dylan, and he'd kind of like, he'd make it, but it was like this one was his, and then this was like the one that you give to your little brother. So Lego is from what I've actually watched a documentary about the Lego founder and the whole simple idea around the toy, but I had never thought to use it as a tool to teach
yeah.
people about work. So how did you use Lego to teach people about work and about work styles?
So to give you a overview, right? So one of the things I don't is less about teaching, but more in helping people to come to a realization on the problem or whatever issue that they're facing. So one of the principal founding philosophy of the method that I use, Lego Serious Play, is that the answer is from within. Okay. So usually it comes from a questions that we want to talk about or we want to explore, right? And I would never use it in a scenario where that person doesn't have the answer. So we really use these particular methodologies for when we want people to dig a little bit deeper within themselves to find their own answer, right? Find their own answer. Uh, so it's interesting you talked about your brother's experience with Lego and itself, like how does it help people to find answer, right? So you already talk about when it comes to Lego itself. There's so using Lego to help people to find their own answer is good. Certain reason behind it. One is Lego. I think I have some Lego. Like, give me a second, right?
He's
I'll
going to get his
show you.
Legos, everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm narrating this for people who are on YouTube. So Eric's grabbing some Legos. He's got them on the shelf.
I mean, you see those two boxes. Those are my Lego set, right? But I've just some over here. So Lego, as you can see, you said already, there's always instructions, right? And those instructions are quite intuitive. Usually, there's no a lot of written words whatsoever. And no matter where you buy your Lego, if you buy it in Memphis, buy in Seoul, buy in Shanghai, they're always the same. They're systematically created, right? Engineered. And when you looked at it and when you look at the instructions and when you touch the Lego, you would know that this doesn't work right.
Mm.
Why does, I mean, let me just ask you, why doesn't that work, Brooks?
Right. It doesn't work because you are using two ends that are the same to try to insert, and clearly it's not designed to fit.
Fantastic answer. That is logical thinking, right? Straight engineering. It's logic, right? It doesn't work because you're using the end that doesn't have a stop on top. You need a stop on top to put into the female end, what to speak, so to speak, to make sure that it sticks, right? It's logic, it's engineering, logical thinking. So when you're building Lego, when you're thinking with Lego, right? We tell people to think with their hands. So when you're building that, you're actually applying a certain level of logical thinking behind it. You're activating the right hand side of the brain, or is it the left hand side of the brain, right? Doesn't matter, left, right.
Doesn't matter.
But you get the idea, right? However, when it comes to Lego, right? So we have, I don't know, right? So if you take, I don't have a, yeah, actually I do. So this is what we call a 2x3, right? 2x3.
Yep.
Two. stop by 3. If you take 6 pieces of this together, I think you can create over a billion combination, right?
Wow.
Just play. Just somebody did the math. Like
Yeah.
nobody actually tried it, but you can do it. There's an algorithm to help you calculate that, right?
Oh,
So I mean, you can just change the angle, and then there's already a different combination, right?
oh.
And same when your brothers and yourself are using Lego to create things that engage your creativity, right? That engage the non-logical side of your brain. So when you're using this as a tool to think, then that actually enable you to engage both logical side and creative side of the brain, right?
Mm,
Instead of, so that's helpful when, I mean, we all have our preference, right? Some people, when it comes to when it comes to solving a problem, somebody use some people immediately go into logical thinking, right? Because that's how some people have preferences, and some people already immediately, maybe yourself or maybe Haley, will immediately go to the creative side, right? Let's think out of the box instead of being logical about it. So what this by using Lego Serious Play, we just give it a bit of a balance to make sure that people are engaging both sense when it comes to using logical and also using creative side of the thinking when it comes
mm-hmm.
to solving a problem, or when it comes to digging deep and generate some insight of a, it could be a business issue, it could be a personal issue, or could be a other issue that we talked about. And it's good because it's good for meeting, it's good for people to when it comes to coaching, is also helpful because you said, right, your brother John. So so usually we'll give people a questions, and then they build, think, and then they will share. Uh, and it's helpful because when you build something yourself, just like John, when he built something, when somebody mess with it, you feel, what the fuck? Don't do that. When you build something, it's natural that when you create something yourself, then you take a sense of ownership behind it,
Mm.
right? No matter is something that you do online, or a bookshelf that you stack together and say, "Don't mess with my bookshelf, man. What the hell? Why are you
Yeah,
changing things
this
around?"
is the shelf for Walter Sobchak. Don't try to put your nonsense other toy here. This is
Right,
Walter's shelf. Yeah, exactly. I'm getting.
right. So when we do that, then people have a sense of ownership, right? They say, "Oh, this is mine," and they own it, and it create a stronger sense of emotional anchor when it comes to the things that they say, when it comes to the things that they say. Yeah, I'm going to commit to that. So it's helpful to do it when it comes to talking about difficult issues, right? Maybe, or just getting people to slow down a little bit and just think about what's important, or prioritizing things when it comes to work. So it's one of the methods that we use to help people to think, to help people to articulate their thought, so to speak. Yeah, a little
And
bit.
there's something like really disarming about Legos.
Yeah, yeah.
It's really disarming. It seems to like neutralize a room really quickly because it's something that is universal that everybody seems to know about. Everybody has in some way has some connection to Legos, whether you were obsessed with Legos or you had a sibling that was obsessed with Legos or you had kids that were obsessed with Legos. Somebody has come into contact with Legos in your time. And so it disarms you in that you're like, well, this can't, I mean, you call it serious play, right? But it can't be too serious. It's just
Sure,
Legos.
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it can't
it's
be.
Lego.
You can only be so serious when you're making Legos, right? You can only, and when you give somebody 6 pieces or just like a bowl, the bowl, the creative bowl. There's only so much, intensity that you can put into it. And one of the things that I know to be true about Korean culture is that uh, I described this actually recently on I was a guest on a podcast and I was trying to describe nunchi, and the only way to do it is to interpret that, like, how to be socially based on the environment that you're in. And you were describing the hierarchy of Korean culture, which last time is like if you're 1 year older you're superior and all of these things. And there was a really interesting case study that we did while we were at Yonsei about Korean airlines and how the Korean airlines tended to have higher accident rates. And the more that they investigated it, they realized that the primary cause was that the co-pilot, who in Korean culture would be subordinate to the main pilot, was not speaking up when he saw, or she saw, mostly he, when he saw something wrong because of the hierarchical structure. And one of the ways that they disarmed that structure was to have the pilots communicate to each other in English and not in Korean. And I see this at using like a similar mechanism when you bring Lego to play. It sort of disarms and disrupts the pre-established social hierarchy, and people start to see each other as equal in this exercise, which then translates to the work environment, which then translates to a more collaborative and less stressful experience for the employees. Am I reaching there, or is that pretty accurate?
Absolutely accurate, right? So one of the key things that I'm working on right now, a lot of the time, most of our clients are international companies, right? So we're talking about American company, European companies that works in Korea. They have a presence in the market, and then most of the time, this company would have a foreign executive, right? Because it's just how it is. A lot of the time, representation, or because they're closer to the home market. So very often there will be a culture differences when it comes to the Korean ways of working, let's say comparing to the German ways of working, which is rather flat when it comes to culture wise, right? People would a lot more likely to speak up. And these foreign executive will come to us and say, "Oh, Korean never speak up. They're so used to following orders. Why is Korean culture like this?" And I will also reply that culture is not on a spectrum. In a sense, it's not on a binary spectrum.
Mm.
What I mean is, it's not a binary, but it's a spectrum. Let me rephrase: it's not a binary, but on a spectrum. So to say that Korean people don't speak up is wrong, right? Because you're using binary now, right? Yes or no, 1 and 0, right? What it is Korean just don't speak up as often, right? It's on a spectrum rather than they don't speak up. So when it's on a spectrum, what it means is they simply need more incentive, they simply need more motivation, more support to do so. Like all cultures are on a spectrum. It's unfair to put it in a binary term. And just like you say, right, a lot of the work that I do is to make sure that there is what we call enough scaffolding. Yeah, scaffolding is useful when it comes to reaching places that is too high for you to reach, right?
Mm.
With the right scaffolding, anybody can achieve the kind of behavior that you are looking to replicate or you want them to do.
I
And
have
there's,
this
there's
mental I have this mental image of like a ladder, and to climb the ladder, the ease of the ladder climb is directly proportional to the spacing of the rungs of the ladder. If I'm having to reach really far to grab the next one, the chances of me being able to continue to pull myself up are very challenging. But if they're in smaller increments, then it's easier for me to navigate the next step.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you need so there's two ways to help for people to reach the higher heights, right? When it comes to designing a structure that support them, there's two ways, right? One is increase the scaffolding, give them more support. Second, lower the challenge, like you say, right? Step by step.
Hmm.
So, for example, right, one such a common problem when it comes to dealing with cross culture, when it comes to Anglo-Saxon philosophy and Asian philosophy, is people don't speak up in meetings, right? You go to an MBA class between the difference between your uh, whatever, right? Your Harvard MBA and your Yonsei MBA is professor asks questions. In Harvard, everyone's like, yeah, let me answer that shit. Let me get that point, right? Because participation is the grade.
Mm.
In Yonsei, what is that like, Brooks?
Well, I mean, for the native Korean students, it was mostly crickets.
Yeah, nobody would put their hands up, right? Nobody
Yeah,
would
it
do
was
that.
us. It was us.
It was always the Americans or the Europeans or the Asian American that would put their hands up and answer every single questions, right?
Yo,
So in
not to
that
deep.
case,
Yeah, go. I
yeah,
like. not to derail too much, do you think you'll be able to hold this point in your mind? I can come back to this. I know exactly where I'm at. Please continue to fill your thought if you want to finish it.
So what you want to do in that particular scenario, right? So executive would say, my people don't speak up in the meeting, so your challenge is too high, right? So there's two ways that you can fix that, right? First is you build scaffolding. Instead of asking every single people to speak out in front of a room, I will always tell them to give them a piece of post-it, let them write down their thoughts, collect those thoughts, read it out yourself. Scaffolding. Right.
Anonymous input doesn't put anyone on the spot.
Absolutely. Scaffolding.
Brilliant. Yeah.
In a culture that people don't speak up, you want them to speak up a little bit more often in the office, lower the challenge. Get them to talk about personal stuff first. Because everybody can talk about themselves, right? Everybody can. So start like you say, right? Climbing a mountain is hard, but it's a lot more easier if you build some steps, right? Bring down the challenge step by step, measure them, right? It's something that most people don't think about when it comes to but it's intuitive, right? It's very intuitive. You have to build it up step by step. You have to lower the challenge, like give them more time is one of the, it's also a way to give them more scaffolding, right? Yeah.
That is, I mean, that's applicable to everything.
Everything.
In my world, most people would associate me as a health coach. People get paralyzed to taking action if they feel that the challenge in front of them is too great, and they just take no action. So it's reducing it to try to get momentum. Momentum seems to be the key here. The more things the smaller you can break it down and make it easier, the momentum, the confidence, it all comes with that. So anybody that's listening here that is like, oh, well, I'm not an HR, or I don't work for a company, or I'm not even sure how this applies to me. Like, that's how it applies to you. That is a key principle towards being successful at anything, is one, getting out of binary thinking, that it's either off or on, that it's either right or wrong, that I either do it or I don't, and start to see it more as a spectrum. Because when you see that, then you go, oh, well, then I do have more influence over this than I thought. There is a step, and that's so crazy that the Lego play, the method, it allows you to take that hyper logical thinker and allow them to access some creativity, but it also allows some of the people that are creative and can't seem to put structure around anything to it invites them to structure their thoughts around their creativity. That's awesome. So what I was going to bring up, again, we won't name any names, but this is
oh boy,
this is by far the best example of what we were describing when it comes to the difference between Korean culture and willingness to speak up and Westerners to speak up. We were in a class, Eric and I. We were in a class, and the professor, very well educated, educated in the States, very smart guy, believed himself to be very open-minded, and he asked a question that he was not prepared for, and he said, what as foreigners, what do you guys notice about Korean culture that you find interesting or strange that you want to bring up in class? And there was a lot of different answers. One of them, it started small, but it was like small things, people speaking up. And then I remember you, Eric, being I find it very interesting that Korea culturally, when it comes to sex and public displays of affection, is very reserved. Yet, when I turn on the TV and I watch teenage K-pop groups go on the stage, they're dressed very scantily, and they're very sexual. It's very, very provocative, and I find that to be very interesting. And I don't know who said it. I don't know how it came about, but someone said, I find it really interesting that some Koreans tend to think that homosexuality among Koreans is not real. And the professor, I'll never forget it as long as I live, he said, well, I've never met a homosexual Korean. No shit. It was the hands, all the foreigners, all the hands in the air. Like, hold up. Don't
So
you
that that
think, sir?
so that was that. So this is a riot. This is a
Yeah.
riot. But that was definitely a 2 or 3 seconds where everybody's like, "Did
Yeah.
he just said that? He just said. Did
And
you
it,
say?
dude, it
He said
was
that?
like,
Did I hear what he just said? You
it
hear the
was
same
a,
thing?
it was like an actual tidal wave of response, because it was like it flew in the face of logic. It flew in the face of the culture we were trying to set as a university, globally minded. And it was just like, well, sir, don't you think that if there's a sincere effort to stigmatize homosexuality, that maybe no one would actually tell you that they're homosexual for fear of being stigmatized and cast out? Does that even occur to you? And people absolutely lost their shit in the
Lord,
audience.
it was definitely a highlight that
Oh
in
my
my
God, he had,
engagement.
and it
Like
was just
he
like,
actually
I've,
said
yeah, I mean,
a PhD educate a PhD person actually said that, right? Yeah,
and
a person with
and
a
like
PhD actually said that.
to see him, I mean, Korean, with all due respect, Korean skin, especially, well, they tend to be very fair, you know.
Sure.
I don't know how he could have been more fair skinned. It's like any color that he had was gone. It's like he was frozen. It was, as, I mean, we call this in the States deer in a headlights look.
Yeah.
He got caught in the headlights and he stepped in some shit, had no idea what he was
Hey,
stepping into. He messed with we call that in Memphis, like, dude, you messed with the wrong one, son. You messed with the wrong one, son. And honestly, the Yonsei, so here, like you were saying, academically, look, let's just be real. If you go to any major MBA program in the world, almost all of them are using the same materials. We're all referring to Harvard Business Review and we're all reading Harvard case studies. And so, yeah, I mean, like, there's a certain degree where, you can say that I got a better education here, I got a better education there. But really, the value of the program to me was twofold. Was the experience of really working hard. I mean, we had to work really, really hard for a
mm,
while. And it was at a level of effort that I had never really put in academically. I was well equipped mentally, but just the willingness to work that hard was certainly something that was it was an acquired taste, and I had to do that. But the other was this. We had a cohort of roughly 55 people, about 30 of which were native Korean. So that leaves 25 people. We were
yeah.
from 18 countries in 25 people. I had happy birthday sung to me in 13 languages simultaneously. And I had this conversation. I've referenced this because it's fresh in my mind now twice. But one of the things that I was describing to my friend Ryan, who hosts me on a show, and you are an exemplified version of what I was describing, is that in these days, there are global citizens that are well adapted to many cultures, speak many languages. One of our colleagues, Leif, was notorious for speaking 7 languages. And in the States, especially where I'm from, there seems to be a resistance to this shift. They
Mm,
think it's only happening here. So the real stereotype is, now when I call to the bank, I have to press 1 for English, and there are people that are livid about pressing 1 for English. Like they're somehow overly inconvenienced that they have to push a single button to get it in the language of their choosing, as if something's being taken from them. And I'm like, no,
mm,
you don't understand. So you're being invited to participate in a changing global society that honestly you probably don't understand, which is fine. But to be resistant to it is to be left behind. And if the United States is at risk of anything, in my belief, it is being left behind culturally. It's being obsolete, because what they don't understand is that there are millions upon millions of Leifs in the world that speak 7 languages. You think Leif is worried about what number he has to push for one? He can push any number. He can push them all, and he's gonna he already knows it. So, like someone like you speak at least 2 languages at a native level, and you're working on a third to at least to be super highly proficient. You might even speak multiple versions of Chinese, Mandarin, and Cantonese. But my point is that many of the listeners are going to hear this show, and many of my friends, close personal friends, family members, they haven't yet been exposed to this rapidly evolving global society that is tuned into things like digital currencies and open trade markets and learning from multiple cultures. And so you, through mostly by no choice of your own, were thrust into this shifting global culture where you grow up in Hong Kong, but you live in England, and then England takes you, you work in hospitality. Now you're living in mainland China, and before you know it, you're in Korea. And, we have friends that this is now common among the people that we know. And honestly, the primary motivator behind this show is to expose people that might find the show because they know me to these ideas. When I say we talk about health, life, health, life, society, culture, and health. Life, society, culture, and health. And this is we've wound around, but Yonsei was like the opener. Actually, well, I say meeting Sam and then my notorious friend Sam, who Eric knows very well. That was like the first nudge where it was like, oh shit, there's some different types of people, and Sam's talking about like this is some normal ass shit, and then he's inviting me to participate, and before you know it, I'm in Korea, and I'm in that classroom completely oblivious. I'm in there with a mohawk, tattoos, and I'm wearing a baseball cap to it, like a globally ranked NBA program, and I was just like, I had no idea. And
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
had to learn the hard way, and I'm hoping that I can invite people to do the same without
No,
it being so
I
hard.
think it's very important, right? Because if it's true what you have described in Memphis or in America, in a sense that the longer you are entrenched in your own safety environment, the more difficult it is for you to get out. So there's actually a very uh, interesting social experiment that people has ran, uh, particularly when it comes to being entrenched in their own view. So and a lot of the time, like you say, exposure is a way to help people to get more experience and see things from a different perspective. However, this study actually showed that. So what they did is they take people from one spectrum of view versus the other spectrum, right? Extreme spectrum. Let's talk about left or right, whatever you want to uh, name this. So they take people from this spectrum, and they spend and people from this spectrum spend 1 month being completely exposed to views, opinion on the other spectrum. Let's say if you're from the right, then you only look at left Twitter feed for a month. Vice versa, right? Right, only look at the left. Left, only look at the right. What they find, yeah, you would think that they would change, right? You would think that,
Mm.
oh, exposure is a good thing. However, the opposite happened. When people are so entrenched on one view that even if they spend a month only looking at the opposite side, their view actually entrench even stronger.
Mm.
They actually find that, well, even when it comes to the phase of hard evidence, then they would completely disregard scientific research. They would completely disregard real data, anecdote or empirical evidence. They would disregard it. So that's the danger right there. The longer you are entrenched, the harder it is for you to get out of there. And the only way for you to be able to reach out across this spectrum is to find a common experience that you can talk about. That if there's
Scaffolding.
scaffolding, or you have to have one common ground, right?
Yeah.
For you to bridge. Sometimes you think about your experience in Yonsei, where was that, right? Alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
When you
Yeah.
and the Koreans out drinking, you starting having a good time. Baseball, right? You start talking about baseball, then you're starting to make a connection.
Mm,
So the more diverse your experience, then gives you a much better chance to be able to reach across the spectrum, right?
yeah,
If you're so entrenched in your own savior environment, you have zero commonality with the other side, then you have no chance.
dude. That is like one, it's landing with me because I talked about this recently on another podcast. I made a post or I made like a story on Instagram, like, and I'm not going to go through the whole recount because people have already heard this. But the short of it is, I read an article that normally I was primed to agree with the outcome of the article.
Mm,
And the article said 95-year-old Nazi concentration camp guard deported from the U.S. And so my primed thinking is that like I'm for it. I'm anti-Nazi. I'm a left-leaning independent voter. Like I'm against Nazis, right? So I'm so I'm primed already to side with the outcome. But the more that I started like actually reading the facts, not my interpretation of what I thought, anybody that was a Nazi sympathizer, how they should be treated. I was just reading facts that I was like, oh, it even said that he wasn't a Nazi. Like, he's not a Nazi. He was at the concentration camp for like 2 months at the end of the war. It wasn't even like a concentration camp in the way that we've been primed to think about it, which is that, they're killing Jews. It was like basically just like a standard prisoner of war camp that kept people from all over. And it was just like this side place. And the Germany's being decimated. So they had to repurpose from some Navy people to like substitute as guards, and he was only 19, and it was like, you get drafted into the war, like that's just what happens, right? So the I questioned my mistake. If I had not even a mistake, but I just my mistake in other people's minds is that I questioned the article and the way that it was written, because they went on to tell you how bad the conditions were at the camp, but they're like, no shit, it was like a fucking prisoner of war camp at the end of the war in
prison,
Germany.
yeah.
Like, no shit, right?
Right.
But then they openly acknowledge that he never did anything wrong. He was receiving German pension, which, he lived in Germany for 11 years after the war ended. So he wasn't actually fleeing. He was a legal immigrant in the United States for 60 years. And
Wow.
basically some cruel human being from ICE, Immigration Services, and DOJ, to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Nuremberg trial, found one of the only remaining living human beings on Earth that they could tie to this thing. And they like sent him away. Now, here's my point is that the people who, I mean, maybe attack. You can only be attacked. Like, I don't know if you can actually be attacked on the internet, right? Let's just call it what it is. I'm not in physical harm, but there were people that were like throwing heat my way. And to your point, they were the people that have been the most entrenched in their way of being. That when, even though we were on the same side, and like, just to be truthful, they were people on the left side of the political spectrum that would be, they would consider themselves to be social justice warriors. They have been entrenched in that way of thinking for a really long time. And
Sure.
even though I was on their side, I have been exposed to lots of different things that allow my mind to be pliable. And because I have been exposed to many cultures, many ways of thinking, and I've gotten lots and lots and lots of reps of getting to stabilize my mind and my emotions to have conversations that challenge me. And Yonsei really primed me to have those conversations.
Sure.
Again, I won't name names, but one of the ways that I found that I was able to fit in is I was actually able to help people find common ground. My group, again, I won't name names, but I had a Muslim Pakistani man and a Jewish Israeli woman
Oh
in the
yeah, I forgot about
same
those two.
group, in the
Yeah.
same team. So just by virtue of background and exposure, they are preconditioned to disagree about everything.
And
Yeah.
they are both of them are disagreeable individual when it comes to
Right.
a lot of things.
Yeah, and love them as we may, and we develop strong personal relationships with both of them. The point was to only emphasize is that the only way to get them unentrenched was to find that common
Find
ground.
common ground, man.
And
It's
that
the
was
only
the
way.
only way. And if I said, hey, you need to sit in this other person's perspective, all it did was entrench them more. When we were able
Absolutely.
to find those degrees of pliability, put people in the shared experience, then they were able to like, okay, I see where the common ground is. Now I'm willing to engage in that.
Absolutely. That's exactly my point. That is exactly my point. It's funny you talked about your experience when you're getting flack online for showing a bit of a variation when it comes to thinking. I heard the metaphor on somewhere that like when it comes to political spectrum, the extreme ends is not actually a straight line; it's actually a horseshoe.
Mm.
So the extreme end of whatever that you're looking at right now, they're actually a lot closer than they
Mm-hmm.
are further apart. So it's a horseshoe, right?
Bro,
So
you're
they're
blowing my
actually
mind.
so the content is maybe different, but then the methodology is exactly the same.
Oh.
It's a horseshoe. It's not a straight line. Yeah.
Oh my God. It is a
So
horseshoe.
I think you just experience that, right? Your experience really illustrated that.
Whoa. Okay. That's it. I mean, we're
I
definitely
think
gonna have
we got
we
we peaked.
yeah, we peaked. We're definitely gonna do a
We
part
peaked.
3, but we're cutting it off.
We
Eric,
peaked,
dude,
bro.
like we need to do this all the time. I mean, it's just
For
like
real, man. I
this
mean,
is once a month.
recording or not, or once a
Yeah,
month,
yeah,
make
yeah.
it a regular thing.
Every is gonna be Eric. Every fifth episode is gonna feature Eric Wan. Oh, Eric, man, seriously, thank you so much for coming back on.
Pleasure,
As
man. Thanks for the love.
always, very engaging, very fun, and exactly what this show is about. So,
Thank you, sir.
anything you'd like to leave the audience with today?
Oh wow, you put me on the spot there. Nothing, man. I think just appreciate what you have. Just continuously learning, expose yourself, get out there. Don't get into think about your comfort zone, right? And think about what stretches you. Don't get in yourself into the panic zone, just like Brooks talked about when it comes to fitness, when it comes to your personal spiritual development. Take it one step at a time, man. Just one
Mm,
step at a time. You don't have to read a book in a day, just 2 pages. That's all
yeah.
you have to do.
Thank you, Eric. That's man, awesome stuff. Serious fun. Eric Wan, everybody, the one and only.
Thank, thank you.